Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Murray, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the University of Guelph and this President's Dialogue. Since 2006, the President's Dialogues have provided a forum to explore critical issues that affect our world. Our focus today is climate change, debate, dilemma, death. The University of Guelph is pleased to have a wonderful partner co-sponsoring the dialogue, and that is the cooperators. And I would especially like to recognize Barbara Turley McIntyre, the Director of Sustainability and Corporate Citizenship. Barb, would you stand up? Given the importance of our subject, we are pleased to make the dialogue accessible to a wide audience through a live webcast. In this way, we can bring a truly global perspective to today's discussion. So let me extend a special welcome to our virtual audience. We have here also present in Rosansky Hall members of the University of Guelph, students, staff, and faculty. There are other students who have joined with us today that I'd also like to recognize. First, joining us from Antigonish, Nova Scotia, are students from the John Hugh Gillis High School. Hi, guys. And we have some hometown students with us as well from Centennial High, and welcome to you guys also. I would particularly like to welcome members of our local community. The university values every opportunity to unite with our friends and neighbors in Guelph. And this is especially the case when we come together to reflect upon issues of critical importance to our community and to our world. The shape of the dialogue is just that, a discussion. There will be no formal presentations at all. Rather, the President will guide an open and unscripted discussion among our distinguished guests. This format will lead to lively and spontaneous debate and to a deeper elaboration of the issues from multiple perspectives. After the discussion among our guests, all of us, both present in this room and joining us through the internet, will have the opportunity to join in the dialogue. Yes, questions can be emailed in. President's Dialogues are one way that the University of Guelph fulfills a university's role to be the conscience of society and to promote free and open inquiry. Universities have a responsibility to examine issues of wide social importance. The President's Dialogue brings together people with great and varied experience and insight, people who might not otherwise ever meet together in this particular configuration. And so it allows for unique interaction from multiple perspectives. The dialogue's goal is to move the discussion from inside the university out into the wider society. One of Guelph's key values is to build and foster a vibrant civil society. President's Dialogues speak to this mission. It is a distinct privilege, then, to introduce our host and moderator of today's dialogue, a person who embodies the University of Guelph's commitment to truly making this a better planet. please welcome the President of the University of Guelph, Dr. Alistair Summerlee.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Can I extend a warm welcome to everyone who's here as well and joining us through the webcast. As you all know, this particular dialogue is focused on climate change. And what really could be more important to us than climate change in terms of survival of our species and ecosystems, survival of ice caps and islands, and survival of the species of human beings, in fact, maybe even survival of the planet. So I think it's really important that we have a discussion not about issues debating whether or not climate change exists, but what we're actually going to do about it. And as you've probably heard in the media reports, the pre-discussions in Rio at the moment make it look as if there's very little that we can agree on in terms of what we're going to do. And so I have a panel of people here who I am convinced are going to give us erudite instruction about what we should do in order to take action. And I'd like to introduce them to you. I'm going to begin with the home player, and that is Barry Smit, who is on my right to your left. Barry is Canada Research Chair in Global Environmental Change. He has spent a great deal of his time looking at the vulnerability and adaptability of communities and social systems, both locally and internationally. He was on the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change from 1998 to 2006, and his work resulted in him being a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
Next to Barry is a man who's a distinct friend of the University of Guelph, Ron Dembo, the founder and CEO of Zerofootprint, who has a very simple philosophy, which is measure, compare, and change. And the idea that if only you can measure things, you start to be able to make comparisons and you will make change. And he's designed a whole series of ways in which we can think about doing this to reduce our footprint. Ron is active in both the for-profit and not-for-profit sectors and brings a really unique perspective to issues of dealing with reducing our footprint. Welcome, Ron. Next to me then is Sherolyn Vettese. She is the CEO and inventor of Wind Simplicity, and that has a very simple idea behind it. Just as you have a furnace in your house, so you should have something that provides you with wind energy in order to be able to support the electrics in your house. And it's a neat idea that clearly has a great deal to go yet in terms of being accepted, but it is nevertheless a simple way for us to think about how to make a difference. Sherolyn is also very active in civil society, both locally and nationally. She has run for the Green Party, both provincially and federally, and actually has a very a firm belief that ideas just don't have any boundaries at all, and that there's always a solution to every problem. So welcome, Sherolyn.
Thank you.
Next to Sherolyn, then, a man who probably needs absolutely no introduction anywhere in Canada and probably in many places of the world. Welcome, David Suzuki, Canada's most well-known and beloved scientist, I think. Not just your television appearances and your books, but your absolute passion to help people understand science is something that we have all admired from a distance, and it's fabulous to have you here. Thank you. In addition, of course, a man who has worked tirelessly to make people aware and try and encourage change when we think about climate change. Welcome, David. And last, Paul Kovacs. Paul is the Executive Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. He's actually an adjunct professor at Western in economics, which is a small university somewhere to the southwest of us. He has a long career in public policy, including both the governments of Saskatoon and Ontario, and has worked for the Economic Council of Canada and Insurance Bureau of Canada. He's also worked for the UN and World Meteorological Organization on climate change specifically. Welcome, Paul. So, the idea of the dialogue is we will have a discussion that will probably last about 50 minutes. Then we'll throw the panel to the wolves and let you actually ask questions. When it comes to asking the questions, there are microphones about if you would go to them, simply because we need to make sure that the people who are listening on the web can hear your questions. And it's very helpful if you would introduce yourself. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, if you could just say, you know, my name is Fred or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But it is nice to be able to attribute the question to somebody when you ask one. So let's begin. Let me pose a question to all of us. We hear a lot of debate about the cost of doing things that mediate the footprint that we have. Where's the right place to begin that argument when we have the economic, political side of the house saying we can't afford to do this, and we have the activist side of the house saying we can't afford to do this? How do we engage in that debate and discussion?
By showing them they can make money by doing the right thing. I think that's really key, because that's what people understand. And I think that companies that have made the change have shown that they can actually make money. They become more efficient, they get more productive, and it's actually the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for the environment, and it actually saves them. The problem is people don't like change, and how do we communicate that and get that message out is part of the problem. But there are solutions, and you can make money by being green, by being more efficient and being more sustainable.
Go for it if you just chime in.
The problem's actually simple in principle. It's simply the way we measure things. So, for example, if you keep a one-year horizon and you try to evaluate things, you'll find that many things get cut off. If you look 20 years in the future and you say, is this particular renewable energy system a good one from an economic point of view, you might find it, well, could be. That's one aspect. The other part is simply our financial markets are not geared towards financing the sorts of things we need to finance.
That's true.
They're not for example, there's no credit ratings applied to environmental good. I'll give you a real simple example. Imagine I take two homeowners, and let's say they're identical twins. They live in houses that are identical, they got identical families, they make identical incomes, and so on. They go to a bank, and today they go to the bank and they want to borrow money, and each would be treated identically. In other words, banks can't distinguish between these two. And now I add one more piece of information. A is red, a big energy hog, and B is green, you know, very careful with energy. And now I'll ask you the question, who would you rather lend to? Now, so this is the kind of analysis that's not done. There, for example, is no rating of someone who is environmentally conscious or energy conscious. If those ratings existed, if those things were measured, you would find a complete change. You could apply the exact same tools we use in finance today, and you'd see a difference. We just don't measure those things.
There are some changes in the building industry, BOMA is called, and what they found that high-rises, let's say in Toronto, where they were actually more rentable if they had a lower operating cost, if they used less energy and they were more energy efficient. And they were using that as a selling point. In other words, as the price of energy goes up, people start looking at the overall cost, and getting that information out and measuring it is important. But then they will make that decision between a red building and a green building if they look at the entire cycle of the ownership of that commodity or renting. It's just not the initial cost, it's looking at everything. And getting people to be aware of that is part of the solution.
Paul?
I just wanted to mention that Jackie recognized the cooperators for sponsoring today's session. Cooperators is an example of a company based here in Guelph that's one of Canada's leaders in the financial services industry, seen as outstanding business being operated in Canada. It's also been recognized by a lot of third parties as a leader in the environmental community. And I think just one illustration that good business and good environmental practices are completely consistent. There's no difference whether you're talking as a company, as you're talking as an individual. Being the best you can be and being good to the environment are completely consistent objectives.
You looked as if you were going to say something at one point. You were shaking your head.
I couldn't disagree more with everybody so far, so I just realized I'm just totally out of it. I mean, I think it's absolutely absurd to try to go back to the economy, to make money, for Christ's sake, about saving our lives. I mean, this is just crazy to say that that's got to be what drives innovation. How can we get all the facts when we don't even know how the planet works? And what are facts going to tell us except to support maybe short-term economic goals? The problem is this. We live within a world that is shaped by laws and principles that emerge from science. Physics tells us that we live in a world in which you can't build a rocket ship that will go faster than the speed of light. I hope everybody knows that the results at CERN that said they can make particles go at 6 kilometers faster than the speed of light turned out to be wrong. I mean, it was a mistake. We know that we live within a world that is constrained by physics, the law of gravity, the law of entropy. We can't build a perpetual motion machine because of entropy. We live with that. In chemistry, there are principles that govern the kind of reactions, the kind of molecules you can create. There are diffusion constants, reaction rates, atomic properties that limit what you can do chemically. And in biology, we know that our biology dictates certain things, like any human being cannot live longer than 3 or 4 minutes without air. You know, so surely to goodness, any kind of system you construct says air is your highest priority to protect. If we don't have air, we're dead. Yeah. If you don't have clean air, you're sick. That's right. So I mean, there's no economic thing that we can now posit to try to protect air. That's just a basic principle of the way that we see the world.
Okay, I completely get it. But if it is so clear, why aren't we doing it?
Because we are living within the paradigm that thinks humans are so smart and so important, so that we now have, you've heard about the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line is the economy, society, and the environment, generally depicted by 3 circles of equal size. And then where they overlap and where all 3 intersect, that's the sweet spot. You do everything there, you benefit all 3 circles. This is the most absurd idea I can imagine, but this is what's driving us. We think the environment is the same size as society, which is the same size as the economy. I mean, this is madness. The real world is, there's a big circle, and that's a biosphere. That's a zone of air, water, and land where all life exists. And Carl Sagan told us if you shrink the Earth to the size of a basketball, the biosphere is thinner than a layer of saran wrap. And that's it. That's where all life exists, and we've filled it up. So the real circle is the biosphere. Within that are 10 to 30 million smaller circles of varying size, and that's the species that exist within the biosphere. Right now, one of those circles is 40% of the bigger circle, and that's us. We are now taking over 40% of the net primary productivity of the planet, and that's what's driving other species to extinction. We're way too big. And within that, there should be a tiny circle, which is the economy. And yet we allow our actions to be driven by the economy. It's suicidal.
But
So even for those like me who accept that the earth is governed by these natural laws and would like to see public policy and decisions of individuals be more respectful of those and operate within them, there's still this pressure to have decision-making based upon other principles, economic principles primarily. We've become, it's a reality. So the question to me raised by Alistair, I mean, we can just say, no, let's pretend it doesn't exist. Or we can say, what are our options to move towards a view which recognizes common aspects of the environment that serve everyone, including economic services, social services as well. So to me, part of that transition will involve breaking down this dichotomy that there is a thing called environment and a thing called economy, and that they're a zero-sum game. We hear it all the time amongst certain interested parties, including many political parties, which will say, we can't do this to protect the environment because it will endanger the economy. To me, that's a false dichotomy. And I'll give you one example that illustrates that. We had the Atlantic cod fishery, one of the most abundant fisheries in the world, that sustained communities and over decades. Centuries. And, but then our technology developed such that we could identify the location of every individual fish, and our market system applied to that commons resource, because it wasn't only Atlantic fisher people who were able to access that resource, it was also people from the US, from Spain, from Portugal, from Iceland, and so forth. And no country would limit their access to that resource for fear that the other people would use it. It was a classic tragedy of the commons. And even within Canada, when fisheries scientists said, that fishery is under threat. Oh no, we can't do anything about that because we'll lose jobs. We lost the blingin' jobs because the fishery disappeared. So my view is that we have to develop an ability to restructure our economy to recognize these things. I'm actually a supporter of the market. When I buy shoes, I go to the store and I select the shoes that lowest cost, or
there is no lowest cost,
or the right color, you know, like pink, and that's a market good. But fisheries, atmosphere, water, climate are not market goods. They're commons resources available to us all. So I think we have to somehow change the mindset that these are, you have one or the other.
Look, would you at least agree we live in the real world determined by principles of physics, chemistry, and biology, all right? We can't do anything about those absolute principles and conditions, all right? That's what regulates the way the planet works. Other things, like borders around our countries or our property, which we will go to war, fight, and kill to protect, mean nothing to nature. You know, what do you think? Birds migrating from South America to Antarctica, when they come through Canada, did they get a visa to pass through? Yeah. I mean, what the hell? Or insects, or fish, or dust, or air, or water. Our borders don't mean anything to nature. Yet you go to Copenhagen 2 years ago, 192 countries, trying to negotiate something that doesn't belong to anybody through the lenses of 192 national borders. It's crazy. And then we construct things like capitalism, economics, corporations, markets. These are not forces of nature. These are things we created. They're the only thing we can change. So this is all I'm saying is, let's make the real world what it is, and then let's adapt ourselves to protecting the real world. You see, air, water, and soil are not economic entities. They're sacred elements. They give us life. They support us. And we need a new economics is what we need.
But David, I don't think there's anybody here who disagrees with you.
Right.
But it's the how.
Then what the hell's the problem?
But
if anybody... No, I disagree with you. Everybody doesn't agree with me because we're still arguing within that anthropocentric worldview.
Can I just give you my own personal experience? Because I graduated from
trying to be...
No, and you've got really good points. But I'm actually, when I was in university in the 70s, we grew up, we were part of the baby boomers, and we were the promised generation. And we knew about these things. I mean, ecology was the most popular course, and we wanted to change the world. What happened to us? We went the economic way. We found out when we graduated from university that we couldn't get those jobs, the fields that we wanted to. I mean, today, the same thing's happening to our children. They go to the tar sands. Why? Because they're the ones who can hire and get the most money.
Right.
So even though that we know about these issues, and I knew about them too, the fact of the matter is that you still have bills to pay, and the people who can bring about the change need money.
And if that's the world we're operating in, let's not even bother with this discussion.
But the point is we have to bring the change. We've known about it for centuries. Climate change has been known since the 1800s. We've known about these things since the 70s, and very little has changed. You've been so good at communicating it, but where is the change that's happening?
The problem is the environmental movement, which started 50 years ago this year, and was very successful when Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. There wasn't a Department of the Environment in any government on the planet.
That's right.
Now you think about, what we think of as environment is very, very different. We've got laws protecting air, water, species, millions of acres of land. That has been an enormous success. The problem is we didn't shift the paradigm.
Yeah,
so we fought against the dam at Site C on the Peace River, and we won it 30 years ago. We're fighting the dam again.
Yeah.
We fought against the proposal to drill for oil in Hecate Strait 35 years ago, and we stopped it. Well, guess what? They're going to drill for oil in Hecate Strait.
That's right.
So we didn't shift the way we see the world. So we're still using economic arguments, which I believe is driving us on this destructive course. And as long as we argue, well, we got to pay our bills, and we live with, we're hooped.
Ron?
David, I'd love to live in a world like the one you described.
You'd be dead.
But maybe that's the reason. But anyway.
What did I describe?
But you described a world where, the laws of nature sort of guide the principles by which we operate. Okay, that's what I heard. So, in principle, in an idealistic way, I'd love such an environment. But let's take that as fact. What would you propose that we do to move to that world? I mean, let's assume you are now, whatever superpower.
That's the big question.
And that's the question I have for you.
Yeah.
How do we prevent this death?
So, what do you do? I would love to live in this idealistic world. The real world is the one that I'm saying, where our lives and our livelihood are determined by air, water, soil.
But it's not the world we live in.
But it's the world that First Nations have lived in for thousands of years. And when, and they learned that lesson, many of them by trashing the environment and having to come into balance.
Right.
But our power wasn't what it is today. We have now become a geological force. We're altering the physical, chemical, and biological features of the planet.
I believe that.
Right.
I believe that.
So it's time to get off our high horses and say...
But what do we do?
Okay, so I've sat on many round tables. I'm going to Rio next week, but I have no hope that it will succeed. I'm going to be a babysitter for my daughter, who's going to be the poster child of youth and blah. Anyway, that's a long story. I think if we're going to find a way out, when we come together, I'm sick and tired of fighting. When you fight, there's always a loser. And I've fought for 40 years. We've got to come together, and not as stakeholders. When you come as stakeholders, it means you're fighting for your turf, and you're going to defend your stake. But let's come together and first of all say, what can we agree on? Because we've got to build a way of living in which we all agree what the bottom line is.
Like the Charter of Rights.
We have, I don't know, the Charter of Rights, but I
like
think
a basic right.
We've got to say, does everybody agree that air is what keeps us alive and healthy?
Right.
We've got a prime minister who has had childhood asthma,
Right.
Just Google Stephen Harper asthma.
Yeah.
You know, this century, he's been taken to the hospital with an asthma attack. Surely anyone with asthma knows what you put into the air, you put into yourself with consequences. So if we can all agree that air is sacred, whatever we do, you don't violate the quality of that air. And it's the same with water, it's the same with soil and food, it's the same with all of the energy in our bodies as photosynthetic activity, and biodiversity delivers these things. Can we not agree at that level? If we don't agree with that,
a general
we're
principle.
pooped.
Right.
Okay, let me ask you a tough question. Okay?
Pardon me?
Let me ask you a tough question. You think air is really important. I think it's really important. Can you tell me what the quality of air in your house is like? How does it compare to other houses? You care about it, right?
Windows that open? I don't know.
Or is the air in this room? Is the air in this room good?
I don't know.
But we don't know.
No, but what we've got to do is design the way we live, and everything we do.
But wait a second. If you truly cared about air, you would measure it.
Well, sometimes you can see the air.
No, I mean, I know, I can see smog.
But sometimes you can have analysis paralysis.
No, but I know smog when I see it, of course. But you know, the most fundamentally basic things, like, is the air in my house good air, we don't measure.
I have great air, but anyway.
No, but whatever the case is, you know, I think it's another manifestation of if we truly believed as a species that climate change was really that important, do you think our governments would be doing what they're doing now? In other words, if we truly believe that it is as serious as I believe it is, this is more than Pearl Harbor, as we discussed. So why aren't we doing more? So I mean, reverse engineer the thing.
We don't do more because we're driven by economic and political agendas.
No. It's because we don't truly internalize it.
In 1988, a guy ran for president of the United States and said, "You vote for me and I will be an environmental president." He didn't have a green bone in his body. But George H.W. Bush had to say that because the American people were concerned about the environment. In 1988, we re-elected Brian Mulroney, and he appointed his hottest political star as a Minister of the Environment to show the environment mattered, right? Lucien Bouchard. I interviewed him 3 months after he was elected. I said, "Lucien, what is the most critical problem facing Canadians?" And right away he said, "Global warming." And I said, "Well, how serious is it?" And his answer was, "It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now."
That's
1988.
That's right.
In 1988, atmosphere scientists meeting in Toronto, Ken Hare called the meeting. Stephen Lewis was appointed by Mulroney to be one of the chairs of this meeting. They said, the evidence is in, we are affecting climate, and called for a 20% reduction in 15 years. So the call was there, the concern was there. You tell me why we didn't do it.
But what is it that we need to do? Okay, we all agree. Let's say we get to the point where everybody agrees the air is something we want to protect, the water, etc., etc. What do we do? What do we actually need to do? Because what we're rehearsing is Rio. What we're actually doing here is Rio. We're all saying, but you're not agreeing on the principles. Yeah. And then you're saying, no, you need to measure them. No, what is it we need to do?
We have to be more aware. We have to be more aware of our actions. Everything has a cause and effect. But the problem is with the environment is that the distance, the separation between cause and effect is really great. So you don't realize when you buy your shoes, Barry, and you're buying the lowest price, that that there's a whole lot of reasons why it's cheaper. And so when I go and I buy, when I start to buy organic food, it actually costs more. And people would say, "Why are you buying this?" And I say, "Well, okay, that's a good reason." And I would, and what happened is that the check-in counter clerk would actually put in the lower price, and I would make her correct it to the actual price to show organic, because I knew somebody would be reading the data off of the scanner, and I knew that this was an important statement for me to support something to get it started, and it was the right thing, it was healthier. And I would say it's cheaper for me to buy organic than to be on medication, because right off the bat I'm paying $14 just for a dispensing fee. So there's a cost for everything, but people don't realize that being at the checkout counter as a consumer has a ripple effect all the way down in South America or in China, wherever. And there is a price to everything, but everything does come down to money to change, unfortunately, because most people that understand that language the easiest. We know about what you said, and you're absolutely right. But when it comes to making the decision for shoes, people do the same thing. And that's the sad thing, how I see it. When I ran for the Green Party, it was the same thing.
You know, running for the Green Party is part of the problem. I supported Elizabeth May. I paid money for her campaign. Thank God she's in there.
That's right.
But what it does, there shouldn't be a Green Party, for heaven's sakes. It's not a political issue.
But it's,
you know, look at the last debate that we had before the Greens had a member. All the journalists said, well, the Greens aren't here, so we don't have to discuss the environment. What the hell?
That's right. That's why I was a candidate, because at least I could talk about it.
No, but the Green Party, they then become the party, you reduce it then to just another category of political priorities.
Okay, I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting.
It's not so easy. That's a sad thing.
I want something. Okay, yes, pay more money at the till, but give me something that we could go away from here to say will change what we're doing.
We're going to Rio, and this is in the imaginary world. Now we're going to Rio. In the same way, in 1944, as the Allies began to realize that they're going to win the war, they called a conference. John Maynard Keynes was a lead economist there. There were politicians, business people that met in Bretton Woods, Maine, 44 nations, and they said, what do we do when the war is over? I mean, we've trashed half the planet. What do we do? So they invented GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. They invented the World Bank. They invented the IMF, and they tied currency to the American greenback, and it worked. Now what happened? You know, the two of the countries that were absolutely demolished, Japan and Germany, became two of the most powerful economies in the world. But what happened? They left out the environment. They left it out. So we need a Bretton Woods 2 to put economics in its place in the real world.
Okay, I'm going to take that as number one. Number one thing, a very cogent approach to try and make a difference. What else?
Well, I believe there's a fundamental role for international agreements. A lot of people say, oh, they failed, poo-poo, throw them away. But the nature of the issue is such that given our current political structure in the world, without international agreement, it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary one. And because otherwise you'll have one country saying, well, we're not going to reduce emissions because that other country's emitting theirs, and it's that same old story. And David raised an example which I often use, which is we have international agreements, such as the World Trade Organization, where countries give up a little bit of their autonomy in order for the benefit of all. And it boggles me that we can't have a similar agreement with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, for example. But that's not enough. But I'm encouraged by examples of issues that have been resolved that looked unresolvable. 25 years ago, in this room, half the people here would be smoking cigarettes.
Right. How did that start?
And that changed. And at first, the medical profession made it very clear that there's a connection between smoking cigarettes and your personal health. And it wasn't a good connection. And yet the interests, in this case it was the cigarette manufacturers, were very effective at undermining that science. And they still attempt to do it now, to this day. And as a result of that, people didn't accept. A lot of people did, but a lot of people didn't. And you had the deniers and the skeptics and all the rest of it. Eventually, and so public policy didn't follow the science. Eventually, you had more and more people accepting the reality of that relationship between smoking and personal health. Then you had some courageous public officials who said, we're going to ban smoking here, there, or wherever. Some institutions did it. Now it's common knowledge. I don't know, maybe some of you are smoking surreptitiously under the table, but for the most part, we don't. It's a major change in something that was accepted as being a norm, and it involved dissemination of knowledge about the issue. It involved people accepting, it involves some personal stories, it involves some leadership,
And
and
the
it
law.
involves public policy.
That's
So
right.
I think there are examples. Climate change is a difficult one, but it could follow that route.
And that's if I may add, that's a really good analogy, because I remember that when there was smoking, and it started with no smoking in elevators. And it was the city of Toronto, and they said that there was going to be a $1,000 fine. And it gave the power to non-smokers to tell smokers, hey, butt out. And they were very helpful, and they would butt out. But it grew from that point to the now where they have to go outside. But it gave the non-smokers the authority to, and the law behind them to implement those changes.
Paul.
I wanted to offer two answers, two parts of the answer. One is the Science Foundation for Action, and second is the empowerment of individuals to take action as two of the elements here. On the Science Foundation, David's not alone in speaking about these issues and sharing and describing the threats here. There are groups, Barry and I have been volunteering for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for 15, 20 years now. There's been ways the science community have been coming together to talk about these issues collectively and speaking as strongly as a wide community can do. You can speak a little more forcefully as an individual. Climate change is real. We need to act. We need to act soon. We need to act aggressively. You can say that more easily as an individual scientist, but as a team, we're using words now like unequivocal and very, very strong language. There's a real consensus within the science community, and that foundation of analysis of the problem and making that knowledge as widely as available and as aggressively and as detailed as possible is one part of my answer. You need a science foundation. Canada is losing some of our capacity to understand the Canadian implications and the Canadian specific elements of that with some of the change going on right now. But globally, we've come quite a way in the last 15, 20 years when some of us have been volunteering to be part of this science consensus. On the individual side, as an individual, I commute most of the time. I drove today with my wife to today's dialogue in an electric car, so I have a car that has 0 emissions, and I know my vehicle will never use gasoline. And then there's things that I'm doing that I wasn't doing 15 or 20 years ago in terms of improving the energy efficiency of our home and not using fuel for my vehicle and recycling and a number of things where we are making progress, maybe not quite as dramatic as Barry was sharing about nobody here smoking in the room today, but there are more of us who are being more aggressive and trying to take the right steps personally because the information's out. Suzuki Foundation, others provide that detailed, specific advice as an individual. Here are things that each of us can do, and tell our neighbors and our friends what we can do as individuals. So that combination of a science foundation, that there's an issue that needs to be addressed urgently, is one area where we're making progress, and we need to do more because we don't know all the answers. And the second part is on the individual empowerment, identifying specifics like improve the energy efficiency of your home, use more energy efficient vehicles or travel. There's a number of things that we are able to do individually, so talk about it. Make sure that that message is there and shared with your colleagues. And the young people are the strongest, I think, force to make that happen when that's taught in our schools and brought forward. Those are two ideas.
But Paul, I'm sorry.
Go on.
If you think that we're making progress, why is it in 1988 the government so clearly stated this is an issue that threatens the survival of our species?
No.
And, you know, are we supposed to rejoice now that at least you can buy an electric car? I mean, collectively, our contribution to the total amount of carbon in the atmosphere has simply climbed like this.
Yeah.
So where do you see, you know, what we've been able to succeed at in informing the public? Yeah, individuals are taking steps.
So just a short answer, if each of us are reducing our own emissions, that's a contribution. That is a step. The collective action wasn't one of my two examples. I think collectively, Rio, I have very low expectations of what's going to happen at Rio. My sense of our ability to come up with these broader strategies to bring in more of the corporate sector into showing the kind of leadership that some are offering, but most are not yet showing. There are some broad issues that we have failed to make progress on.
We've got to leave the corporate sector out of it. They're already driving us in the wrong direction. Why do you think we've gone from an awareness that climate change is high to now having to struggle to get back up to actually believe humans are contributing to it. Exxon and the fossil fuel industry have contributed tens of millions of dollars to a campaign to support a handful of skeptics, to support all kinds of websites. You can go to websites saying climate change is junk science, it's a natural process, and all that stuff. Well, guess who's behind it? We can't afford to fight those guys.
That's right.
And all that is in the name of profit.
But then, why is it that Canada seems to have politically fallen far behind others? Are you suggesting that the lobbies are being put greatest on Canada? It's not just surely those lobbies. Something is happening in Canada that has us here wanting to talk about climate change and politically wanting not to talk about climate change.
Most of us did not vote for the government that's in power. 60% of us at least didn't, and 60% of Canadians didn't even bother to vote.
That's right.
Or, sorry, 40% didn't bother to vote. So the government got in partly because we've got this screwy first past the post system, but a lot of Canadians aren't being involved in civil society. And we now have a government that is being driven by ideology. It's very, very clear from Mr. Harper's now track record. He wants to shut down every source of information, shut down the long-form census, shut down the experimental lakes area, which is one of Canada's great contributions to global understanding of water, shut down the annual summer research into the Arctic on climate change, shut down scientists by muzzling them or firing them from DFO or the Environment Department. He doesn't listen to experts. If he did, he would be supporting safe injection sites, long gun registry. He'd be supporting reducing our prisons rather than building more. I mean, this is a government now that is interested in ideology and having an ideological position put into place, not being determined by facts or information.
Why don't you run for government?
I'm an old man. No. I mean, I've been asked this for a long time. If I ran, what party would I run for? I mean, the only party that understands the issues, as I understand, are the Greens. But I don't believe there should be a Green party. And if I were to run, I'd be one person in government. I mean, the power of my position is I've had a television program going to 1.5 million people every week. That there's no way that I could duplicate that by being in government.
But David brings up some good points, and there's actually three. I come to the conclusion, coming from being brought up with what you were teaching and where I am today, that there are actually three players involved. It's a kind of a tension. There's the government policy, the government, the businesses, and you, the consumer. So the government needs to come up with the broad policies that would determine the overall good for everybody, the clean land, clean water, clean air. And then the businesses need to be supported to have the solutions. If there's, I mean, we've been talking about carbon credits, which I don't agree with, but no businesses will do it if no one else does it. So you need to have the businesses to put in the solutions, and then the consumer to support those businesses that are coming up with a solution. So going back to your shoes, Barry, if you go and you know that you should be buying a pair of shoes that will actually do these things and change the direction. But, you know, when you're in the store and no one is looking, and then you end up only buying the cheapest one and not considering everything else, nothing but gets changed. So everybody has a role to play. And that's the community of having all of these things work together and creating that tension. Otherwise, we will remain where we are, and we will be in the death position where it doesn't matter.
I fundamentally have to be an optimist. Otherwise, I would jump off, I'd run across the 401 blindfold. I'm a technologist, I'm a mathematician. I believe that we are in a very different world today than we were 30 years ago. In the ability to communicate broadly across borders. And I believe borders are crumbling. Actually, you just look at the internet, and even silly things, silly things that you see on the net that somehow make it across. It tells me that we have an opportunity to communicate like we've never communicated before. So I believe that there's a way, we haven't found it yet, to communicate And I think the cigarette analogy is a good one, because that's an indication that, I don't know exactly how that crumbled, and I can't really figure it out, but the fact is, the benefits to the commons can be addressed. So the question is, in my mind, and I haven't got an answer to exactly what I do tomorrow, apart from what we're doing tomorrow, which is around energy, I see hope that we can actually change things by using technology that now exists that didn't exist before. And it's really moving very fast. You know, cell phones in Africa allow you to communicate and allow you to change people's lives. I believe also that without dealing with poverty in the world, without dealing with, there's no way we can deal with environmental issues. So we have to take a broad view of it, but we do have a new tool. We have a way of actually getting to people like we didn't before. The question is, how do we use that tool? And you know, we have a particular take, so we're just experimenting with this. You know, and it's actually how you can show effects, but you know, to get the effects that we'd like to see on the scale that David would like to see, I just feel that communicating, David, that we've got to just throw everything away and, you know, live in a completely different world with different, no such economy like the economy we're in is a pipe dream. You have to, we're going to have to change something. So you can't just change it instantaneously. The question, I think it's Alistair's valid question, is what do we do now to move towards whatever that ideal might be?
But you have to agree with David, surely, that with the success of Bretton Woods, if we could be in a position internationally to sit down and say, what are we going to do? What are the structures that we need? We do actually have an example in our, for some of us, not most of the audience, I think, in our living history of actually being able to redesign things. That's because right. we had a purpose.
That example wouldn't work in today's world.
Why not?
Because today, I, in a village in India, will know what's going on in Canada. You know, in those days, you know, a few people in government could make a change. Today, I don't think you could make that kind of change that you could then.
But I think the change is going to come from the individual, in the village, in the cities. Just like it came with the non-smoking. It was a municipal change. It was a city bylaw. And it was minor, it was easy to implement, but it actually had a ripple effect. And if we're thinking, like, I don't think bigger is better anymore. Our governments are broke. They can't do anything. We might think that they can, but they're really restricted. So where most people live is actually in the city. And if we want to make change, we make it in the city, close to the home, close to the consumer. Just like you have these, you know, here at Guelph, you've got your community gardens. You're teaching the students how to grow their own food rather than having it grown across somewhere far away in South America or whatever. Having it closer and making the solutions closer, you can have that ripple effect, and it actually empowers people that they're actually doing something, because the problem is so huge. How can we even start? And that's why it will be such a failure in Rio. We can have all these meetings year after year or every 2 years, however they get together, and nothing changes. But we can make changes at a lower level and it adds up. For example, I was at this smart grid meeting, and the electricity companies are really worried about it's shutting down. I mean, our whole civilization runs on electricity, and it's stretched to the limit. People don't want it to go higher. They have an aging infrastructure. The demands are greater and greater. I mean, you look at everything that's electrified, and they can't cope. But they can't let you know that it's ready to snap, because there would be chaos. So they're looking not at big solutions, little tiny ones that will actually make a big difference. They said, for example, if you look at all your things in the home, your television, your electric toothbrushes, it takes up 20% of your bill. That phantom power isn't 5%, it's 20%. If you go and you start being aware of all the things that is stretching the limit and you turn those things off, you could actually make a change. So if we all did that, and within our community we supported each other, rather than when you graduate you go off into your old companies that you work with, but you stick together and you make this change, it can actually grow. Maybe I'm an optimist, but that's where I think we can do it.
Paul?
I'm aware of the science that David has shared with us that is very bleak. There's some extremely serious problems evident right now that we need urgently to address. We should have been addressing before with greater urgency. Despite that, as Ron was sharing, I live on a daily basis because I need to be an optimist. I need to believe, to get up in the morning and do what I do, that there are solutions. I think Bretton Woods was the right solution for its problem in its day, but it was a time when America was 50% of the world's economy, and America had some enlightened leaders that wanted to do something for the global economy. There is nobody today that represents 50% of the world's economy and has that kind of philosophy, or at least is not demonstrating it. And there was also, when Bretton Woods was the right solution, a public acceptance of political leadership and public action as a way to come up with solutions. I'm not certain that there's that belief today, generally shared. So I find some of my optimism comes when each of us are enlightened to do what we need to do. I want to have a smaller footprint myself, and I want our family to do what we can do. The company that I'm involved in, many of the companies I prefer to work with, show that kind of enlightenment, that it's in their corporate interest and they are taking action, and they think others would like to know about what they're doing, so they're describing what they're doing. I think if 7 billion people, but if many people all started to talk about what they are doing personally, and if more corporations that are trying to do the right thing were more open about why and how they are taking action, this many small individual steps can add up to a lot of positive movement. That's where I believe that there is the potential and some evidence of some real progress going on. It's a different approach. I admire that the solutions that did work for our problems in the past, they would be nice, but I don't think that they can be applied to this problem at this time.
I'm mindful of the time. It's clear that we've been 100% successful in coming up with some very concrete suggestions about what we would want to do. And so I'm going to now throw this open to the audience to pose some questions. Microphone in the center, and I'll keep talking until somebody comes down to say something. And then if you would like to introduce yourself, that would be tremendous. Thank you.
Hi.
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 My name's Karma Davis. And I just want to say that I understand, David Suzuki, your context of economics. I see that we are brainwashed in so many places about the economics. The languaging, all of you in the panel are completely resistant to understanding that economics is a created thing. We keep creating it. I create it every day. I will keep creating my reality in the context of economics. But what I see is that we don't change the paradigm enough in regards to economics. We keep that paradigm going, even though we know globally there's such amazing imbalance going on everywhere. So I just want to say that I personally, talking right now, I'm completely feeling an energy of scaredness. And I would say that's the bottom line about economics. We are scared to live outside of that paradigm. We don't know how. We haven't been trained. We haven't started to train our kids in school systems to do that. We haven't started to look at our responsibility to the environment without economics. So that's just, my question is, I want to know, if you guys really get, the economics is an illusion. It's a game that we've created for a long time. And David's right. He's right when he says that we did not incorporate it into the environment. But in regards to the environment and nature, nature doesn't care about money. And me, my nature, I don't care about money. You guys could get rid of money on the planet because I think it's one of the worst systemic systems ever created. And if I have to come back another lifetime to prove that, I will.
Right.
Somebody want to respond? Clearly, David feels in the same area.
Well, she's got my message that if we don't shift the perspective, you see, Ron, you say you're a man of information and facts. Well, I don't see how you can hold any optimism given the information. You say over the 30 years, enormous change. Yes, there's been enormous change in human productivity and inventiveness. So we revel in computers and the electrified world that we live in. But in that 30-year span, we added 3 billion more human beings to the planet. We destroyed an acre of forest a minute for 30 years. We've added how many million tons of toxic chemicals to the air, water, and soil? Yes, we've got people in Africa now that have cell phones, and isn't that wonderful? But I would say that the very support system that keeps us alive, I mean, I'm astonished that you say, oh, well, we all agree, air, water, and soil. But wait a minute now, if air, water, and soil are our bottom line, then let's get on with protecting it. Don't give me that. Right. But you have to be realistic. I mean, we're being dictated in what we even think about by the economic system and the political system. And it's not going to work. That's all I'm saying. Look, I'm an old man. Whatever happens over the next 5 or 6 years, not going to affect me at all. I'm going to be dead and gone.
David, it doesn't help me to think about all the bad things that have happened over the last 30 years. What drives me is looking forward. So
you say you're a realist.
No, but here, let me give you a very concrete example in the spirit of Alistair. 65% of our footprint in Toronto comes from operating buildings, from the heat, water, gas, everything we need. Take that as an example and mash on that. That's chipping away at something, but it at least gives some concrete move. And I believe that you can actually do this on a global scale very broadly with people's own utility bills. So we attack that, but I don't have a global solution that says, here's a magic bullet. There isn't a magic bullet.
We have a huge lineup of people here. Why don't we have another question?
Speak.
Yes. My question, well, it's more of a comment on what David said earlier about how there's a physical reality that we have to live with. The trouble is, you have almost half of the population of the US rejecting that reality out of hand. There was a recent Gallup poll that said 46% of Americans think the Earth is only 10,000 years old. And if you bring up these examples about how we need the oil and water and soil to keep us alive, these people will just reply, oh, that's okay, there'll be the second coming and the rapture, and God will look after everything and we'll be saved. So when you have that kind of thing and it isn't just the US, this kind of fundamentalist thinking is taking place in many countries all over the world. It's like there's a battle right now between fundamentalism and enlightenment, and fundamentalism is winning. And I think the reason for that is, well, there's Mother Nature, but there's also human nature. And what I'm seeing is that human beings, they don't want the truth. The truth is scary. People would prefer to be told lies that make them feel good. That's why Fox News is as popular as it is. I mean, how else can you explain it? And there was also, David is probably familiar with this, the recent book put out by Chris Mooney, who runs the Smog blog about the conservative brain, and the reason that they reject scientific facts, because it threatens their identity, it threatens their ego. They see it as, like, even in some southern states, I think this was Virginia, where there was a lawmaker who said, don't use the term sea level rise, that's liberal. That's political. We don't want that. And then, of course, there was North Carolina trying to declare that scientific projections of sea level rise could not be used in coastal planning. So I guess the only question that I have based on this and how the trend lines look like they're going, is it time to start looking at a lifeboat scenario to try to preserve a tiny enclave of humanity if the worst happens? Because it looks like it will.
So that's a very different area from the one I thought you were going to. But let's just take that as a question, and can I just possibly ask all of our questioners to try and ask a question? The important thing here is we've got people who would never otherwise be sitting together, and what I want to do is to have these people respond to questions. So let's condense that into, would you think that we should be thinking of a lifeboat scenario?
Yes. I think we're in a survival mode. I don't think there's any turning back. And I think we have to face the reality that it's dire, it's serious, and we don't have a plan in place. The politicians don't have a plan in place, but we have to think about a survival mode. Learning how to grow your food is very important. Learning how to survive, even learning about electricity is really important. And we are in a survival mode. That's how I see it.
Barry?
The question alluded to a point that many other people acknowledge, and that is that transformation of the way we view ourselves and our relationship with the earth involves, among other things, awareness of what's going on. What's happened in the past, what's happening now. And I think that is a huge challenge, to get broad awareness of what's going on. And the preamble to the little question illustrated that in spades. And those of us who have been involved in attempting to inform others of the climate change issue run up against this all the time. And I'll give you an illustration of the challenge. This IPCC thing you've heard about is a huge initiative to summarize the state of knowledge about climate change, what causes it, what impacts it has on the biosphere, the societies, economies, and everything. And it goes through the most rigorous review process you can imagine. It's reviewed internally. It goes to countries. Governments appoint their own people to review it. So if there's any little hole in it, it'll be identified, and you have to correct it. When it came out, it's 3 documents, the last one, this thick. The second working group report, if you counted up the statements in it, and for some reason I did so, there's something like 320,000 statements saying that this is happening to this species as a result of climate, and so on. Someone went through that volume to try and undermine the science and found one statement that they thought might be challengeable. And that was a statement that said the Himalayan glaciers may disappear by the year 2050. And that hit the fan. What a lovely, juicy statement. It can't be right. It must be wrong. Not only is that statement wrong, but the whole IPCC is fundamentally flawed and biased. Not only that, all of the scientists involved are nut bars for suggesting such a thing. And unfortunately, scientists are so naive, us people are so ignorant with respect to the reality of communication, that they said, oh yeah, sorry, we made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. There was a basis for that statement, but by saying they made a mistake, whoever it was that searched out that document, that one statement, was successful, because they now cast doubt on the whole process, and in doing so, cast doubt on the whole idea that there is such a thing as human-induced climate change. Right. My point is that those who try and undermine the science of climate change are far better funded, far more sophisticated in promoting that message than twerps like us. We haven't got a clue in that competition. So yes, the public awareness actually in some parts of the world on climate change has actually gone down. Not because the science has done anything differently, but because those who don't want to have that science accepted because of their particular short-term interest have the skill and they employ the public relations people to undermine it.
Take you back to smoking. Gillian.
Hi, I'm Jillian Murray, Sustainability Coordinator on campus. I volunteer on the Board of Transition Guelph. I volunteer on my local Green Executive. I apologize, I don't have a concrete question. It's just I absolutely have to say something. Each person in this room has the power to make a difference. We are all making a difference, not just by being aware, but by making the changes. And I don't mean like the sort of feel-good changes, like I drive a very efficient vehicle or I took transit to work today. I talk to people about these things. Every single one of us can talk to the people that we know about the things that we do. We can talk to the people that we don't know about the things that you can do. You can just turn to someone on the bus and say, hey, it's a really cool day for a bus ride, isn't it? Yeah, it's nice being in the AC. You're promoting public transit by doing that. Each person in this room does have the power to make a change. Each person on that panel knows what's going on. I would wager the majority of the people in this room know what's going on. And we all know that there are a myriad of solutions that we need to embrace them all.
Sorry, I can't, I have to respond to that. I mean, of course, we all have to change, you know, but in order to even be here, I flew in a plane. That plane, that one plane would produce more greenhouse gas than I use in my car, because I hardly use my car in a year. We all live with inconsistencies. We live within a society that is simply geared the wrong way, so that we can't help but live beyond the capacity of the planet to absorb our activity. To me, the most important thing right now is communicating. I justify everything I do by saying, spreading the word. You know, I'm a sinner. What can I say? Yeah. I'm a sinner like all of you here. Yeah, however hard we try to reduce our footprint, we're caught up in the system. But I think we delude ourselves if we think that there are all kinds of small solutions that are going to get us out of this mess. We need big solutions now, and the big solutions have got to be at the level of governments, and we don't have real input if 40% of us aren't bothering to vote, and if we're not active in civil society to really begin to get our governments to move in the right way. But so there's a real challenge that goes beyond what we do in our individual lives, I think.
Jillian, I didn't mean that we all have small solutions. I mean, we can all become the big solutions. Alistair wasn't always the president of the university, but we each have the power to become a large solution.
I've never been called a large solution before.
A large problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, mostly I'm referred to as a large problem. Carry on.
Hi there, my name's Tanya. I guess what David was speaking about was the macro, and many of us in this room are trying to make changes at the micro level. For the last 8 months, I was covering business news on a national level in Canada, and while I covered corporations and finance, there were a lot of entrepreneurs, very young people in their 20s and 30s trying to make differences. And I guess my question to the panel is, have you seen evidence of new capitalism or the new economy that would mend with the outlook that we are respectful of the environment, that we live with the elements? Why do they have to be mutually exclusive? Why can we not use the new capitalism or new economic principles to be complementary and respectful of the environment? Because I've seen it, it's small, it's not the mainstream, but if we built upon that, could not become the mainstream.
I can answer that.
Go for it.
I'm in one of those fields. And I'm one of the consumers who wanted to bring about the change. And it's very, very difficult, I can tell you that. Most of the people who are looking for answers, they want an established solution already. So they want the proof. And it takes time to get that, which means you don't get the money coming in. It's very, very risky, and it takes time. And I'm not the only one. There's actually lots of solutions out there. But the existing players dominate the field. You know, the coal and the nuclear players, they dominate everything. And oil, and so it's very difficult to get the message out that there is hope, there are solutions. And when you see these things, yes, it might be expensive, but try it, because that's how you nurture these new things to grow. So they're out there, so there is hope.
Anyone else want to?
Well, I'm not sure what the new capitalism is, but the current capitalism has a clear objective. And it may well serve some things, but some things it doesn't serve well at all. And it's when we try and apply that decision-making process to things like water, oceans, atmosphere, which are common properties. And they operate over timescales that are not within quarterly reports or even government's 2-year or 3-year, that's one of the areas where we have serious problems, because there's the belief that currently in Canada, more than in many decades before, we are of the view that the market will handle everything. Well, the market does not handle everything, or it does as you would expect, as with the fisheries. You apply the market to that and you'll deplete it completely. So if you don't want depletion, you have to have something radically different from that, in my view.
A small addition that I would make is that those in the business community that are led into some of these areas, especially some of the new entrepreneurs, perhaps by government incentives or some sort of financial incentive, that can work for a while, but I think the ones that are sustained are the businesses that simply go there. It's what they believe, it's the future that they want to serve. They have a product, they have a market, they have an approach, and I think it's incredibly exciting, and I think they're the ones that are going to succeed and grow.
Yeah, it still comes back to...
If I could have an input, I think someone earlier, said that 40% of Americans didn't believe in something or other. I think one of the problems we have is we've really come to be so puffed up with ourselves that we somehow think we're way up there, and we're different. I gave a talk in Austin, Texas many years ago at the first Green Building Conference, and there were a number of children in the audience, and I said, if there's one thing you remember from my talk, please, to the kids, please remember, we are animals. Did their parents ever get pissed off at me? Don't call my Mary an animal, we're human beings. And you can see what our attitude is. If you call someone a pig or a chicken or a monkey or a snake or a worm, these are denigrations of another. It's like we're superior to those creatures. I went to a store in Calgary years ago, and on the front was a big sign that said, "No animals allowed." And I said to the proprietor, I said, if you enforce that, you won't have any customers. And he didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So we really have somehow, if we could begin by the very fundamental assumption, we are animals. And as animals, the quality of the air, the water, the soil, those are the things that determine my survival and my well-being.
Let's have another question.
Shift.
Hi, my name is Lynette Stradesky. I'm a proud graduate of University of Guelph and employee of the Cooperators. Since the 1800s, cooperation has offered an alternative to the capitalist model, and I'd like to ask the panel, would you like to ditch Rio and come to Quebec City on Thanksgiving weekend, because we have Imagine 2012 happening, and that's going to have a major paradigm shift. We are beginning to create a cooperative economy where the planet and people is put before profits. And I think your input and the input of everyone here and on the internet is key and critical. Forget the government, we are the ones who can make the change. So I'd like to know who on the panel would like to join me.
I have a question. Will we be able to get in the building because the protesters will have done by then?
They're going to join us as well, the ones who want to really make a difference and be there for the planet.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grayson.
Hello, my name is Grayson. My question for the panel is actually to please demand more of us. I'm very, very tired of being told to unplug things and shut out the lights. So I would like to ask you to demand more of the people in this room and ask us to live a real human life that has a lot of meaning to it, and we can do that. And I'd also like you to hold us to account and to encourage us in the proposal I'd like to make to the audience. To the young people, especially in this room, I've been subtly building an army of people that will be running for office as soon as possible. This is on the federal level. We have a few years to prepare for that. And more importantly, and more close to my heart, I'd like to be running on a local level because you actually get shit done. Yeah. So, and you're not going to be a backbencher, you're going to be on the streets and you're going to be dealing with people in a very, very direct way. So please come talk to me after. I want to know your name. I want to have you on Facebook. I want to support you. And we've got a pretty badass roster going on right now. And I'd really like you to join that. So don't settle for just shutting out the lights. Like, run for government. Run for local government. My friend Paul here grew up in Mississauga, and he is planting food. He is growing organic food and teaching other people how to do that. And that is what we need. And that's not a small thing. And you can actually do it. So please come talk to me after and put your name on my list, because in 4 or 5 years, this is going to be a different country, and you are going to be running for office. Don't even run to win. You're just going to make Harper shit his pants. He's going to be really scared when he sees all those young people running for office. So please do that. Thank you.
Question.
Hi, my name's Ian. I'm an environmental science student here at the University of Guelph. And my question kind of relates back at the beginning of the discussion. There was a lot of talk about mitigating climate change for the sake of human welfare. Seemed to be what a lot of discussion was around. So my question is, given that humans, as a society, we have a lot of problems, and probably not enough resources to solve every single problem, what do you feel the implications of deciding to devote our resources to climate change as opposed to, say, preventable illness or nutrient deficiency or whichever other problems? What would you say the implications to doing that are?
That's a very good question. And I think what it deals with, if I may answer that, because I'm coming from a political side, it's up to the politicians. And as I said, they're broke. So right now, most of the budget is actually spent on healthcare, because we're mostly sick. I think to be not healthy is the abnormal now. So there will be a shift, and so it's up to the politicians. So if you want to vote, that's where you're going to make the change, and that's where it has to come from, because they have a limited budget.
Ron, you really opened that question by saying we'll never deal with climate change without dealing with poverty and hunger issues. So where would you put your emphasis?
You know, I think these things are related. You can't separate out the fact that you know, keeping people healthy in situations that we know how to prevent is completely devoid of any environmental issues. So let me give you an example. There are clear links between saving energy and health. You just take 1,000 buildings in Toronto. This is a very well-studied piece. Take 1,000 buildings in Toronto and retrofit them, and you will save $10 billion in asthma-related medical expenses over 20 years. It's a huge number. It's more than it would cost you to retrofit them. So you might ask, why don't we retrofit them? You know, because it's going to save the environment, it's going to do good for the world, it's going to do good for health, well-being. So I think these things are related. So the problem is, one is a very short-term effect. You can do things today to eliminate polio and do it very quickly. You can't do things today to eliminate global warming, even if you had all the money in the world. We've actually caused enough damage today to not be able to stop it, at least. So the question is, what do you do, acknowledging the fact that for a while, for quite a long while, we're going to have to deal with the consequences of climate change, as well as finding ways to mitigate it. But I don't think you can divorce these two issues. So it's not one or the other.
Barry or Paul, where would you put your money?
Where your mouth is.
On your shoes.
I don't think these are either ors. I guess it's a money thing, but I don't think it is a money thing only. But I don't see one as being exclusive of the other. So I think you would tend to healthcare, you would tend to, but at the same time you encourage behaviours of people that are consistent with the world in which they live.
The only part I would add is that we all have choices as individuals. I've chosen to work in the field of climate change. That's where I'm giving my time. That's where I'm working. I think it's really important, but I do share the view that these are all interrelated. It's important to work on all of them, but climate change is so important to me. That's what I want to work on.
Okay, let's have another question.
Hi, my name's Sherolyn Vettese, and I'm a student here at the University of Guelph. And on Saturday, I am going to be flying out to Rio. I'm going with a delegation who's focusing on sustainability in the polar regions. And one of the major issues we're facing as we go forward is negotiators and policymakers are saying that we're too late, that the document is as good as done, and it's just a form to sign it. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and then international climate conferences in general. And what advice would you give to a youth delegation who, for us, the answers seem simple and we know what we want?
Ron.
Yeah, having been to Copenhagen and having decided not to go to Rio, I would suggest that put your energy into what we heard earlier. Create local change the government. I would do more locally than try to change anything at a UN conference. So if you had a choice between spending your energy on Rio or doing something locally, do it locally.
Yeah. I would suggest you go to the Arctic. I mean, we talk about climate change, and we as Canadians should be really embarrassed. It's happening in our backyard. But how many of us have actually gone to the Arctic or north of Sudbury, you know? I mean, we don't even know what's happening right there. And if we saw with our own eyes and the evidence, it's shocking. So I would suggest, instead of going all the way to Rio, unless you want to just go there and see all the pollution and the population, go up north and see for yourself and spread the message.
Paul?
I think going once to one of these events is an event that you will remember for the rest of your life. It's a zoo, it's chaos, it's whatever. So going once is quite a moving experience. I think most of the real contribution you will make and others of us try to make happen elsewhere. It's a show that will happen for a few days. It's important. But there are real ways that you are working and others of us are trying to work to make a contribution. Recognize where they are, find where those opportunities are. You don't have to fly down to Rio every time or wherever the next party is. But to go once, it's interesting.
Okay. Next question.
Hi there. My name's Anton, and I have two solutions that I would like your input on, hopefully your criticism as well. The first solution is the silver bullet solution for every problem that we have on this planet. And I think you might agree with me that if we were to focus as a species on building healthy soil, you will solve every single problem that we have facing us. It includes biodiversity loss, food security, health and poverty, atmospheric pollution, water pollution, so on and so forth. And the other solution involves getting towards that solution of building soil. And I believe that democracy, like who here likes the idea of democracy? Clap. Okay, democracy is a great idea. I like that idea too. But if you look at any research papers on democracy, you realize that it only works on a certain level. It's optimal when it involves 13 people or less. Look at how huge Canada is. Canada is massive. So I would like you guys to think about this, like, how do we downsize democracy so that people in their region can have control over every aspect that challenges their lives, from land and water and resources and finances. Yeah, and I also think that downsizing democracy would challenge people's paradigms, because they would realize how dependent they are on each other and on the environment that surrounds them.
I have only a small comment on the second issue. You've heard from several of us here that we are very frustrated with the absence of Canadian contribution to really making a big difference on climate change. Yet at the local level and in some provinces, there's some really good things happening. The closer I think the governments get to us, the more evidence there are of good things going on. And there are many communities in Canada, there's many other communities around the world that are showing some terrific leadership, reducing emissions, adapting, and in other ways taking action. And in part that's because there's people like us that can get involved and talk directly to what can be done in our community. I'm not certain you have to be as small as 13. There's some communities that are bigger than that are making some real progress. So some of the frustration that all of us feel in terms of failure to get international progress and failure to make national progress, I'm proud of some of the things that are happening in local communities, and I think having people closer to individuals is part of the reason why they're making more progress.
So I just want to make it clear, I'm talking about eliminating large-scale democracy.
Eliminating large-scale
I don't think it works.
No. Well, did you vote?
What is large-scale democracy?
Okay, well, that's part of the answer right there. Minimum, you have to participate in democracy. You have to vote. And if not, then you should run as a candidate. But it's a great system when people participate.
I would vote if it involved, you know, local decision-making.
You vote every time you have a chance to express your voice. At a minimum, in a democracy, that's what you should do.
I think that was the point that Grayson was making, and the point that David was making, and in fact, for those of you who've been at convocations this week, flowing through the welcome from the provost, when she kept saying, "Show up."
That's right.
Is a fundamental component of a democracy, is to have a voice. You need to show up. And if you want to make it a local democracy, you have to show up in the current system in order to change it, to make it a local democracy, would be my view.
And anybody can run. It's not difficult in Canada. I've done it. And I know it's involved, and I think it should be a community responsibility to participate at some level in democracy, because we wouldn't beat up our politicians. They're us. So you get what you participate. If you don't like the slate, then put your name on the ballot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Another question.
Hello, my name is Candace, and currently I'm in Owen Sound helping to build a center dedicated to educating individual change. And for me, I see that we have a large case of diversion of responsibility. We're all looking at each other and everyone else saying, you need to change, the government needs to change. My question to you is, how can we promote and educate people to take responsibility for themselves and their own actions? Because we are responsible, and we are the ones who are creating this. It is each individual.
I would ask you what you're doing.
But, I mean, it seems to me, though, that we've actually had a Rio moment here, because not everyone here on the stage actually agrees that individual change is going to be what makes the difference. No. We've actually, I think, I've heard people say, we need big solutions, and you can go away and you can do all the little solutions, but they're not going to make a difference. Would that be a fair?
I don't agree with that.
My thing is, what I think is a very small thing, but it's the hardest thing to get, and that is to shift our priorities. It's what, you've heard over and over about a paradigm shift. As long as we operate within an anthropocentric worldview, where we're at the center of the action, where the economy is as big as society, which is as big as, we're hooped. I don't care what you do, the little diddling you're going on, you're living within a system that is simply, innately out of balance with the real things that keep us alive. So this is the challenge, is to shift the way that we see the world. And I think that we environmentalists, and my foundation has been just as guilty as any. If you go to our website, we had the Nature Challenge, the 10 most effective things individuals can do to reduce our footprint, and there are books out, 10 easy ways to save the planet. Well, this is bullshit. It's not, there aren't 10 easy ways to save the planet, but we promulgate the notion, if we all reduce our footprint and we do all the right things and turn out the lights and all that, that somehow we're going to be able to carry on with the way life is. Our economy is so bloated. We're living like kings and queens, and we're using up the biosphere in order to keep the illusion that everything is okay, because we haven't internalized the real costs of that economic system. And we think the economy we support a government that thinks we can keep growing forever. That's the creed of the cancer cell. And the result for us will be the same. We never ask the question, what's an economy for? An economy is a means to something else, not the end in itself. But we've made the economy and growth the very reason governments exist, the very purpose of corporations, and we think we'll derive benefits from that. Look at it, our government. Our government, the biggest guy, who's the most important guy in government? Aside from Mr. Harper, who runs the whole show, it's Mr. Flaherty. It's the Minister of Finance is a big guy. And the environment, he's a little tiny guy down there. He's got a minuscule budget. So this shows you what the priorities are of our current paradigm. It's
Ron,
crazy.
I fundamentally believe that small actions done by individuals on massive scale is the only hope I see going forward. I don't see our governments and the world systems we've created, Bretton Woods included, have any hope of solving a problem that we're tackling. That's why Rio will absolutely fail. There's no mechanism for those people to agree. But I believe that grassroots changes done particularly on scale could have a difference. I absolutely believe that even with all the talk about our government, who I don't particularly support, if 1 million Canadians said, I want X, or I believe in X on the environment, that would get on the agenda. I believe that. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here.
Alistair, may I just add how important it is that the individual is? I mean, David Suzuki is a perfect example of how one individual can actually make a difference.
I'm a total failure.
No, you're not. But you can.
I'm a total failure.
No, and you are an inspiration, but everybody can, at least if we're 1/10 of you or whatever, we can still make a difference. So I would still say that an individual is where it starts. And I didn't mean to be rude to you, but I mean, I just think that it's important to be conscious about awareness of our own actions and how it has a ripple effect. We can make a change.
Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Abdul with Alumni Affairs and Development, and I'm also part of the University of Guelph's Energy Conservation Working Group. I have a question I'd like to get an opinion from the panel on. It concerns tools, the type of tools that we actually have available and have, I guess, been proven very effective over the last few decades. In getting a lot of things done, but not necessarily anything about climate change. First, let me say I have a pet peeve about using the term global warming, simply because, when it was first talked about, the average person on the street, even now, if the average person on the street, you talk to them about global warming, and each of them have a different idea. I mean, I've heard people say, wow, Canada is going to be a Caribbean country. I think climate change is a much more effective way of describing it. But the tool that I would like to ask about to deal with this problem, and I say problem, I'm using the singular on purpose, because I think ultimately the problem we have is a choice between life and death, because basically,
this is
well,
we're discussing.
It is, really ultimately a choice between life and death, because, life of the species or death of the species. The Earth's always going to be here, whether we're here or not. So the tool that I wanted to ask about is the tool of marketing. Are we effectively using that tool to get the message out to everyone? I mean, how effective is it? I always like to refer to I think it was in the 70s where a guy somewhere decided that he had a rock and he was going to make a pet. And he marketed that and he sold the pet rock. And he made millions of dollars getting people to buy, a pet rock when they can simply go outside and grab a rock, not buy it. Marketing. Are we really using it effectively? Can we use it more effectively to get this message across and then institute change from that?
Ron.
Yeah, one of the fundamental things that's missing, and it was touched on a few times, is the terrible level of communication skills that we as a group who believe in all of this stuff, in getting the word out. It struck me, one of the first things I saw when I got into this in a big way was the complete lack of design sensibility in anything I've seen in the environmental space. Go to any of the NGOs out there, I'm not going to mention names, but you will not see good design. You don't see Apple iPod stuff coming out of climate change heads. And so I think we have not used communication at all yet, and that's an opportunity.
The thing that might work is fear.
I mean, take your three books this big, how many people could even read it? How many scientists could read it? I couldn't get through the first 50 pages. It's useless. But I guarantee you that message could be conveyed in 3 beautiful graphs or 3 beautiful iconic images with the right marketing skills and design skills. That's what we lack. So we haven't taken the tools of business, which I believe are sometimes very powerful, and applied them to the environmental space. That's what we're trying to do as an organization.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erin. I'm a student here at the University of Guelph. I guess I had more of a broad question. When I started here, I'm environmental science. I had this naive little bubble around me that I was going to change everything. Anyone looking at my outfit, I buy secondhand stuff. I don't drive. I don't eat meat. And I think that a lot of people know that these things are good. And I really agree with Ron when you talk about communication and getting the ideas out there, but I think people know. They just don't care. So I really want to ask, how do we get people to care? Does it have to be a catastrophic disaster? Is it a question of marketing? Going back to the last question. I mean, David, you have done amazing things, and you're a wonderful speaker, and I really feel like you've changed people's minds, but like you just said, in the classic terms, you're a failure because people still don't care. So I guess I was just looking for what your ideas are with moving past just spreading the knowledge and actually getting people into the idea and actually
Can I answer? This will be my last answer. I'm an old man. I have to go and take a pee. But actually, how long is this going on?
We'll do another 5 minutes.
Damn, I should have my pads so that I could just I've actually forgotten what your question was. Because I want to just say, you know, there's no way we can... That's okay with me. It's happening. You know, we're going to use the advertising. Is this what we're going to do? I mean, it's been used very, very successfully by Coke and Nike and Exxon. And is that what we're going to? I don't think that's where the action is. I think it's got to come from person-to-person interaction. I don't believe the social media are where you're going to get real change. So what I'm proposing. I'm an old fart. This is the last part of my life. I'm proposing. I've got enough energy for one more big thing. And I want to call on what I call grizzlies and silverbacks. I want the elders in society, you know, the old grizzly moms who defend their offspring, and the silverback, the old gorilla male. I'm calling on them, people with a track record of really caring about this country, to come together. We don't, you know, I find as a male with my testosterone levels dropping, I get smarter than hell because I'm not thinking about sex anymore. And I can think about a lot of things, and I'm calling on elders to get off the golf course and start thinking about your life and think about the lessons you've learned, the successes, the failures. What have we got to pass on to our children? We remember what life was like when we were children and what those things that mattered to us that have been gone. And let's start asking the question, why are we proud to be Canadians? And my bet is it isn't a balanced budget. My bet is that we see ourselves as a Canada that loves nature as a part of who we are. We see ourselves as the blue-helmeted UN peacekeepers. We see ourselves in a bigger context than what we're all being driven by now, which is corporate agendas and political agendas from election to election. So my proposal is that elders join me. I've begun to talk to Margaret Atwood and Stephen Lewis and Maud Barlow and John Ralston Saul to join me. I'm going to bike across Canada next year, and I'm calling on elders and youth to come out along the way to ask, why do you live here? Why do you live in Guelph? What do you love about Guelph? And what would you like Guelph to be in 30 years when your children are having children? We're not asking those questions. And I think we have to rediscover our place in the world and the things that matter. And let me end with one story. My great teacher and mentor was my father. And my father, when he was dying at 85, I moved in to care for him the last 2 months of his life. And that was one of the most wonderful times I've spent with my father. We laughed and cried and talked. And in all that time, he kept saying, David, I die a rich man. He didn't have money at all. He said, and all we talked about in the time that we were together was family, friends, and neighbors, and the things we did together. That was my father's wealth. We've got focused on other weird things, you know, my big new car, my new computer, my new iPod. Let's get down to the things that really matter. And I want to have that conversation. I hope you'll join me when I come through Guelph next year.
We're going to stop.
But you have to come back.
David, we're going to stop. Pardon? We're going to stop. We're going to stop.
So, eminent discussants, colleagues, friends, guests from near and far, our time has come to an end. Today we have been challenged by the complexity of climate change and humanity's attempts to cope with it. We've heard many different perspectives, and we have been empowered. We have had the opportunity to reflect on how individuals and civil society are making a difference in our world. And we've been also empowered and inspired to combine knowledge and action in order to make this a better planet. On behalf of us all, I would like to thank our distinguished discussants for sharing with us their experience and insights and their wisdom and hope. Thank you for being with us today. Your presence and participation is very important to us all and to our world. And so, a warm goodbye to our virtual audience. Thank you to everyone present for joining us today for the President's Dialogue on Climate Change.